Good morning, my dear students. Today we are continuing with our chapter 2 in history, Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. Students, in a previous lecture we were studied about the Stalinism and the collectivization. Now today I will again recall Stalinism and the collectivization for your better understanding. And in and I will explain you about the last topic of this chapter, the global influence of the Russian Revolution and the USSR. So students, please listen carefully and try to understand. Now, what is collectivization? Grouping a farm into a unit means collective farm is known as collectivization. Now, the period of the early planned economy was linked to the disasters of collectivization of agriculture. By 1927-28, the towns of Soviet Russia were facing an acute problem of grain supplies. The government fixed prices at which grain must be sold, but the peasants refused to sell their grain to government buyers at these prices. Now, Stalin, who headed the party after the death of Lenin, introduced firm emergency measures. He believed that the rich peasants and traders in the countrysides were holding stocks in the hope of the higher prices. So, to increase the agriculture output from large scale mechanized farms to bring the peasantry under more direct political control, make food production efficient, tax collections more efficient. Lesser farmer needed for agricultural, the rest can work in the cities. However, collectivization was met with the resistance from the kulaks, rich land owning farmers, refusal to hand in crops. Kulaks would rather be killed and destroy farm produce than give them to the communist officers. Now, in 1928, party members toured the grain producing areas, supervising enforced grain collections and raiding kulaks, the name for well to do peasants. As shortages continued, the decision was taken to collectivize farm. It was argued that grain shortage were partly due to the small size of holding. After 1917, land had been given over to peasants. These small sized peasants' farm could not be modernized. To develop modern farm and run them along industrial lines with machinery, it was necessary to eliminate kulaks, take away lands from peasants and established state controlled large farms. Now, Stalin reactions to collectivization. Serious measures were taken. The NKVD was especially harsh to the kulaks. Thousands were either killed or sent to labor camps. Now, from 1929, the party forced all peasants to cultivate in collective farms, that is known as kulkos. The bulk of land and implements were transferred to the ownership of collective farms. Peasants work on land and the kulkos profit was shared. Indirect peasants resist the authorities and destroy their livestock. Between 1929 and 1931, the number of cattle fell by one third. Those who resisted collectivization were severely punished. Many were deported and exiled. Farmers rioted and engaged in armed resistance. Stalin ordered 17 million horses used in farming to be killed and replaced by tractors. So those who resisted collectivization were severely punished. Many were deported and exiled. As they resisted collectivization, peasants argued that they were not rich and they were not against socialism. They merely did not want to work in collective farms for a variety of reasons. Stalin government allowed some independent cultivation by treated such cultivators unsympathetically. Now, in spite of collectivization, production did not increase immediately. In fact, the bad harvesters of 1930-33 led to one of most devastating famines in Soviet history when 4 million people were died. Now, many within the party criticized the confusion of industrial production under the planned economy and the consequences of collectivization. Stalin and his sympathizers charged these critics with the conspiracy against socialism. Now, socialism accusations were made throughout the country, and by 1939, over 2 million were in prisons and labor camps. Most were innocent of the crimes, but no one spoke for them. A large number were forced to make foul confessions under tortured and were executed. Several among them were talented professionals. Now, the global influence of the Russian Revolution and the USSR. Existing socialist parties in Europe did not wholly approve of the way of Bolshevik took power and kept it. However, the possibility of the workers' state fired people's imagination across the world. In many countries, communist parties were formed, like the Communist Party of Great Britain. The Bolshevik encouraged colonial peoples to follow their experiment. Getting inspiration from Russia, Communist Party was formed in India also. Jawaharlal Nehru and Rabindranath Tagore also visited Russia to show an interest in socialism. Many Russians from outside the USSR participated in the Conference of the Peoples in the East in 1920, and the Bolshevik founded an international union of pro-Bolshevik socialist parties. Some received education in the USSR Communist University of Workers of the East. By the time of outbreak of the Second World War, the USSR had given socialism a global face and world stature. Yet, by the 1950s, it was acknowledged within the country that the style of government in USSR was not keeping with the ideals of Russian Revolution. In the world socialist movement too, it was recognized that all was not well in Soviet Union. A backward country had become a great power. Its industries and agriculture had developed and the poor were being fed. But it had denied the essential freedom to its citizens and carried out its developmental projects through repressive policies. By the end of the 20th century, the international reputation of the USSR as a socialist country had declined, though it was recognized that socialist ideas still enjoyed respect among its people. But in each country, the ideas of socialism were rethought in a variety of different ways. Thank you, students.